damage. All right, would like to sing some song and just to serenade until my boss say, okay, you out of here, then we out of here. Tumuhani.
Aqui Oh. No, sorry. Can we give a round of applause to our musicians? This mic is more sensitive than I last remember. Good morning and aloha. Oh, well, it's Friday. Can we get a little bit more, Friday feeling into that? Let's try that one more time, everybody. Good morning and aloha. Well, we'd like to welcome you all back to the Hawaiian Journey Theater for our keynote speaker event for today. We are glad that you all could join us this morning. Have you all been enjoying yourself for this week? Yeah. So it's a 3-day event. It's pretty short. We'd like to thank all those who have helped organize this event and all those that has participated so far. So let's give a round of applause to all of them today.
Hope everyone has made new friends and connections over the past couple of days. Just a reminder for everyone coming in, for the students to scan the QR code for participation. There's going to be a raffle at the end of the conference. So I also need to remember to scan that.
Yeah, we're giving away a lot of cool prizes, so please scan in, fill in your details. Well, I guess before we get started to our keynote speakers for today, we'll introduce ourselves. For those of you guys that weren't here on Wednesday, I'll introduce myself again. My name's Jack Moi Moi from the islands of Fiji. Senior, graduating in April, majoring in hospitality and tourism, minoring in computer science and Pacific Island studies.
My name is Alana. I'm from New Zealand. I am also a senior, graduating next month. So that sounds crazy. Thank you.
So excited for graduation. But to get everything started, we'll start with our first keynote speaker for today. But before we turn the time over to him, we'll turn the time to Rick, who is the VP for Digital Demand Generation. I was like, man, this is such
Tongue twister.
interesting title. But he's the VP for Digital Command. Yeah, for Salesforce. He works for Salesforce. And Rick is going to be introducing our keynote speaker for today. So we'll turn the time over to Rick.
Thank you, brother. It's a mouthful. It's basically Rick Tolman, who does something with computers in Utah and San Francisco. Kia ora te whanau. So lovely to be here today. Very excited to represent and present our amazing keynote. Before we start, though, would be remiss not to acknowledge all the wonderful event organizers that have made this day possible. Likewise, lovely to share and feel the ohana and the wonderful spirit that we've all been blessed with this week. Grateful to all of you for spending your time and talents with our students. How many of you here again this is the first time to the APCC conference? Amazing. Amazing, yes. And one of the wonderful things that we have to celebrate by being here this week, even this month, is there's a special cultural recognition. And some of you that went to the night show last night, those of you that have been meeting with the students this week, you can tell and feel the spirit of our ancestors are here. I'm a product of the Polynesian Culture Center. My grandparents immigrated from New Zealand here to the islands to help build and develop the Polynesian Culture Center. Along with my Uncle Alfred Grace, my mother was a dancer here at the Polynesian Culture Center. And seeing the Materangi family play and dance for us, I can sense my mother's spirit here. And today, many of us are here in this room because of our mothers. We're also lucky this month to celebrate our wonderful women in our lives. And I'd love to have the men in this audience give a round of applause in recognition of Women's History Month for the wonderful women in our lives. We have two very special women here today whose presence, if we hadn't had them here, we would not have our keynotes. And I'd like to recognize Elva and our wonderful family of Sione Havili that's here today. Special mom that's being here, Sione, his wife as well. Thank you for bringing Sione. Once in a generation, we have an amazing chance to meet leaders who impact not only our immediate lives, but everyone around them. Sione Havili is a beacon and a champion of light and hope in the Polynesian Islands and in the state of Utah. I was lucky enough to meet Sione almost a decade ago while I was working for a company called Domo, also with a very weird title, digital web something. Sione, I found out about him from a recruiter. A recruiter came to me and he said, "Hey, can you help us recruit this? He's the top-tier talent from Adobe, the best salesman in the state of Utah." And I said, "Yeah, I'm in marketing. What can I do?" And they're like, "Well, you're Polynesian. You're probably related." I'm like, "Oh, well, what's his last name? Havili. Oh, that's Tongan. I'm Maori." I said, let me teach you the difference. You know, Tongans love fried fish and fries. Maoris love fish and chips. We're very different, but similar. And so I got to know the recruiter to say, well, how can we get him here? How are you going to get him here? We were a little startup. And they said, we don't know. You know, he is the top talent for one of the premier tech companies in all of Utah. And we had the capability to bring him on board. And so I told them, I said, here's the one key thing. You're not attracting Sione here. You're attracting his wife here. You need to make sure your pitch includes his wife and his family. This is much more about one individual. It's bringing the entire ohana. He stands as a representation of his culture, of his tribe, of his father Tavita. That's the only way that you can bring someone to join our Domo family is if you recruit his family. And they said, which I love, they said, Lydia's wife, they said, she's been the toughest negotiator this whole process. It's like, we wish we could work directly with her. And that to me is emblematic of the entire family and their love for each other. But most importantly, Sione is a man that leads his life by the key women in his life as well, his matriarch and his wife. Sione has an incredible impact on the islands because of his example. He currently serves as the Regional Vice President of Sales. It's actually a longer, weirder title, similar to mine, but Regional VP of Sales. Sione has also been a key member of the community. He serves as the Vice Chair of Utah Polynesian Professionals. He is a man and leader of the faith. He serves the youth. He serves the community. Many of you that are here today representing companies were mentored by Sione. Sione has mentored and developed so many of our Polynesians in the state of Utah that now they're on their journey to give back to the new generation as well. We say with much pride, when we have the capability to bless and impact our cultures wherever we are in the world, we do it. And Sione is one of those that has been able to create incredible impact in the islands and in the state of Utah with Polynesians. His story is one of incredible faith, resilience, virtue, trust, and his capability to take his story, much like many of you students here, who you're first generation, you're raised up by the tribes and villages to come here to school. You're propped up by your ancestors. Sione is the fulfillment of his ancestors' songs, their dance, their pride. He is the hope of being a warrior and a healer. And I'm so excited for you to hear about his story today. APCC Ohana, please help me welcome to the stage Sione Havili.
Finally, the rock has come back to Laie. Sorry, that wasn't part of my keynote. I've always wanted to say that ever since I was in whitey tighties, jumping off the bed, body slamming my little brother Etu. Extremely grateful for this opportunity. First of all, Rick Tolman, first speaker, my funeral. Everyone needs a hype man like this guy. I love Rick. And the band, I forgive you. You guys were awesome. I know you didn't want to play any Tongan music, but you'll get sick of that in heaven. So first of all, if you guys were looking to get blown away by an amazing keynote speaker like The Rock, Jason Momoa, Isaac Halasima, you've come to the wrong place. I'm not a professional speaker, but I'm grateful for this opportunity. Just 2 years ago, I was sitting in the audience on the front row, and I had the opportunity to listen to Dave Elkington, who was the CEO of Zant Inside Sales. The year before that, we had Lawrence Cole from Google, and so it's truly an honor to be able to share the stage with these esteemed gentlemen on such a long list. I've had a chance to look at the breakout sessions and to see all the people that are on that list, and any one of them could have been given this opportunity, but I just feel honored that I've been granted this opportunity to share my story with you guys today. When I was here 2 years ago, I had a full head of hair, and I was pretty svelte, and I'll kind of share you guys a little bit about that. During COVID, we spent a lot of time with our families. My new haircut's a long story. I lost a bet to my children. I shaved my head, and then I realized I actually lost a bet to Father Time. I don't have the G-Walk, it's called gout, so any of my cousins or family in the audience, I actually ruptured my Achilles last week, and when I visited with the doctor, he told me that one of the side effects would be excessive inflammation or swelling, so that explains the rest. So we'll go ahead and continue on with my keynote. So one thing that Rick talks about that I think is really important is our heritage. And when I came here 2 years ago, I didn't realize my connection to this wonderful place. Vice President Isaiah Walker talked about this being a storied land, a hallowed land. And as I prepared for my keynote and started to do more and more research, I was fascinated by the connection of my people and my heritage here. I lived in New York City for a time, and all of the people with European descent had a love and an affinity for Ellis Island. And my belief, or my view, is that all of us from the Asian Pacific area has a connection to this place, much like them in Ellis Island. So where I'd like to start is, rather than telling me my story, I want to share my heritage and where I come from and the connection that I've had to this amazing place. I'm going to talk about it in three parts. First, my mom's side. My great-grandfather is named Tevita Mulikinikini, and he was one of the early converts of the church in Tonga. Long story short, he ended up marrying my grandmother, Leo Tukuifale Langi. They had 11 children. My grandfather, Kime Tuipolotu, was the second oldest in that family. He was one of the missionaries or the missionary workers that came to Laie in the early 60s to build the PCC. On October 12th, 1963, they completed this beautiful venue. That same year, well, before that. So this is my grandfather, great-grandfather, Muli, and his family. One thing that he was known for is he was a composer, a poet, and a writer. He actually composed the Siosefa Laka Laka, the story of Joseph Smith that has been performed here at the PCC almost since its inception. My grandfather, Kime, had 8 children. And in 1963, he and my grandmother, Faleaka, got a visa to travel to Laie to come to America to work. They had to leave their older 3 behind. And incidentally, there was an interesting situation. At that time, you could not board a plane if you were more than 7 months pregnant. My grandmother was 8 months pregnant. Somebody had leaked the news to the gate agent, and they lined all of the suspected pregnant women to check them. As it started to get to the front, or my grandmother started to get to the front, a lady coincidentally intervened. Her name is Nanasi Sekona. To this day, we don't know if she did that intentionally or if she did that accidentally, but by the time they checked her, the gate agents were tired of all these false pregnancies, and so they stopped the search. My grandmother made the plane, came to Laie. Weeks later, she had my auntie Leo. Less than a year, they got deported back to Tonga. But because my auntie Leo was born here in Laie, there was a loophole, and they were allowed to come back to America. They were one of the first and early settlers in Utah in 1967. The circle in red, that's my beautiful mother, Elva Wender. So let's talk about the second part of this. A lot of people do not know this. I am part Japanese. My great-grandfather, Otojiro Yamashita, migrated to Tonga in 1923. He worked for a company called the Bono Trading Company. And when he came to Tonga, he actually migrated with his brother, Kinzo, and his 2 cousins, Gonkichi Bano and, and Juhei Nakao. Now, we always thought that my grandpa Muli was the first person to come to America or to come to Hawaii, but due to the research of my first cousin, Luisa Tupea, we found out that my great-grandfather actually came to Hawaii in November 26 of 1923, almost 100 years ago. When he got to Tonga, he met my great-grandmother, Lose Masina Taufalele, and he had my grandmother, Milika. Just after she gave birth, my great-grandmother passed away. After that, within a year, he ended up going back to Japan to find a wife, and he ended up marrying a lady named Sume. And after they got married, they had 2 more children, my auntie Kayo and my auntie Miyoko. They were there for 13 years. They loved Tonga. But it came to a point where my great-grandfather, Otojiro, who was also known by Otokichi, wanted his girls to learn Japanese. So in 1937, he made an executive decision that he was going to take his 3 daughters and his beautiful wife, Sume, back to Japan. Now, he's originally from an impoverished part of the Wakayama prefecture known as Mirozu. And he often bragged to my grandmother that this place reminded him of Tonga because it was located near the ocean. Now, my grandmother was raised by her two aunties, Soloi and Alisi. And they pleaded with Otojiro to leave her because she was taking care of them. So reluctantly, my great-grandfather allowed Milika to stay. But the plan always was to come back and retrieve her. Unfortunately, well, this is a note, or this is a letter. He had actually given instructions to my auntie Kayo how to get a hold of or how to retrieve my grandmother, Milika. A very harrowing story. Unfortunately, the address was wrong, and 4 years later, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 1941. After that, there was a mandate in the Pacific that anyone of Japanese descent needed to be sent to internment camps in New Zealand. So on December 12th, my great-grandfather's brother and his two cousins and their families were immediately evacuated out of Tonga. My grandfather's brother, Kinzo, his family had passed away as they were getting transferred from an internment camp in New Zealand to Australia. Cousins Gonkichi Bano married a Tongan lady named Jessie, but they were not allowed to come back to Tonga because the war was just so bad. And then Juhei Nakao actually married a lady with noble birthright. Her name was Meleane Ma'afu, and she was raising two boys in Vaini. And so Queen Salote allowed him to come back to Tonga, and so he was the only Japanese person ever allowed to come back after the war. So aside from my family, the Havilis, that were the descendants of Otojiro, the Bano family, if any of you guys know the Vaitulalas, those are my Japanese Tongan cousins. And then the Nakaos is actually a Tongan last name, very, very prestigious family back home. So my cousin Ata in New Zealand, I asked him for some information on Mizoru, and he found this picture. This picture was painted in 1950, and I take solace in knowing that when paintbrush was put to canvas, that my grandfather and his family were in the village at that time. 65 years later, we were able to get a hold of our Japanese ancestors thanks to my auntie Luisa, or my cousin Luisa, serving in Japan. And my auntie Kayo and my grandmother Milika were able to reunite after 65 years. My grandmother got in an accident just 10 years prior, but I remember this reunion and it was amazing. And our entire family had a chance to spend time with Kayo and her husband Ori Kawase, and we're still in very close contact with them today. So that is my Japanese heritage. The third part that I want to share with you guys today is just to continue on to my connection here at BYUH. So my grandmother found a man and married him, Nomani Palauni Havili from Hateho. They ended up having 12 children. My dad here is the fifth child, Devita Kaufusi, in the red circle. And he owned businesses, and they did very, very well. Now, this is what gets really interesting. Kind of reminds me of the infomercial that I always saw growing up. But wait, there's more, all right? My dad's oldest sister, her name is Pelenaise, and she eventually married Amataele, Niwa. She was the first of my dad's family to migrate to Laie. In 1965, she came to BYU Hawaii to attend school. And lo and behold, she stayed in Hale 1, the same Hale 1 that my daughter now stays in here at BYU Hawaii. 4 sisters after her all stayed in Hale 1 as well. Now, the interesting connection is that when she got here, she ended up meeting a lady named Josephine Sarau. And Josephine actually ended up being her best friend. Josephine Sarau ended up introducing her to her sister Harriet and her mother Hattie. And Hattie treated Pelenaise as if it was her own. There's a Hawaiian term, hanai, calabash. In Tongan, it's pusiaki. So for the 4 years that she was here at school, she was raised as if she was a sarau. Now, interestingly enough, that was her family away from Tonga, away from Hateho. Now, my grandmother had the youngest in my dad's family. And what she did is she reached out to Pelenaise and Jojo and gave them the opportunity to name the youngest baby in my dad's family. And so Auntie Pelenaise made a couple suggestions. She says, you know what? We know someone here that we want to name him after. We suggest Makanui, Hilehile, Ululani. Okay, Makanui means eye for greatness. Hilehila means bashful or shy in Hawaiian. And then Ululani means destined for heaven. My grandmother, she liked it, but she ended up making a deviation. So she decided to name her youngest Maka Ululani. And the inspiration behind who Jojo and Pelenaise named my uncle after was a gentleman named John Makanui Kawe. John Makanui Kawe was the son of Harriet Sarau, and John Makanui Kawe is the father of President Kawe. In my family today, we have 6 that are named after my Uncle Maka. 2 of them hold the name Uncle Maka, 2 of them hold the name Maka, and 4 of them Ululani. So the connection that I have to this place is amazing, and it's immovable, and I am so grateful for the opportunity that my heritage and my ancestors have given me to be here. Before I get to my keynote, in October, I had the opportunity to sit down with President Kawe in his office. And the week prior to this, I actually buried my Uncle Lani, my Uncle Maka, and my Grandma Faleaka. A year before that, John Makanui had passed away. I haven't shared this story with President Kawe yet, but I knew there was going to be an opportunity where I could share this connection. But in that room that day, I knew the spirit was strong, and I know that all of our ancestors were in there with us that day. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, how important it is, and I think it's only fitting. Roots Tech is happening today, day 2, and I wanted to bring you guys to Roots Tech, so thank you. So let's, thank you very much. So let's talk about my story a little bit. By raise of hands, anybody seen the documentary at all? Just want to make sure if I can sit down. No? Yeah? Little? Yep. All right. So there was a documentary that was published on my life story this past October. And I'm going to touch a little bit on the journey, and I'm going to give you guys kind of a sneak peek on things that weren't shared there. First of all, 12 years ago, my wife and I were caught between a rock and a hard spot. I had a degree in 2005, I had a couple years of work history that were pretty solid. But because of some decisions that I made in my youth, it was very difficult for me to land something was solid that I could take care of my family. And so I'd always wanted to go to law school growing up, but because of my background, there were some risks that I probably wouldn't pass the bar. At the same time, there was a company called Omniture that ended up getting acquired by Adobe. And they purchased Omniture in 2009 for $2 billion. It was the biggest tech acquisition at the time in Utah. And so I had a friend that was there, and he made some really good money in the acquisition. So naturally, as you guys can imagine, it piqued my interest. So I ended up finding out that they had 3 entry-level sales roles, and I threw my name in the hat. Well, once I applied, I found out that those openings were not a secret. There were hundreds of applicants. And so my wife and I prayed, thought about it, and we felt like the tech route was probably the best for our family. I still remember my interview like it was yesterday, kind of at a boardroom like this. Now, I don't know if you guys have been in tech interviews. It's not like a standard interview. When you walk in, there's actually a panel. You don't interview with just the hiring manager. And so on this panel, there were 3 director-level business development executives. Jason Coop, John Dunford, and Chad Knutson. And I could tell early on in the line of questioning that they were asking me that they were trying to sift through all the candidates as quickly as they could. because they had so many to get through. And so I had an epiphany. I just said, well, if you're looking for something wrong, you're going to find more wrong in me than anyone else. And the faces were priceless. Apparently, nobody starts interviews that way. So they said, what quite possibly could we find wrong in you that we haven't found in anyone else? And I said, I'm a first-degree convicted felon. And the room went quiet. And for the next 30 minutes, I shared the story that I'm going to share with you guys today. Let me start from the beginning. So I came from very humble beginnings. My father and mother met here in America, actually in Utah. My dad was a bus driver for 38 years, never made more than $45,000 a year, supported all 8 children. My mother graciously stayed home and raised all of us and did a phenomenal job. One thing I remember is that we were taught, like any Asian Pacific Islanders, to be resourceful, right? Nothing was given to us for free. So my brother Etu and I had a paper route for 8 years. We never missed a day. If we wanted additional money, we needed to go shovel the snow or mow the lawns of everyone in the neighborhood. We even jumped in dumpsters to get aluminum cans so that we could recycle for additional money. We were taught to hustle. So I don't know what it's like where you guys are from, but in Salt Lake City, they offer summer free lunch. So at all of the adjacent elementary schools, you have the privilege to go get free lunch. And so my dad said, hey man, lunch starts at 11:30 to 1 o'clock. I want you guys to get on your bikes and eat as much free lunch as you guys can. Some days we got to 3, on good days we got to 4 or 5. But that was the heritage, right? That's what we were taught, is to hustle, is to basically be resourceful. The other thing that I think is no different for many of you guys, and obviously this is a secular keynote, so I'm not going to try to tippy-toe to the other side, but man, the foundation in the gospel and the love for the Savior was grounded very strongly. And then lastly, and I know this isn't just me, but I was raised with a very heavy hand. Now we call it, me and my dad talk about it, and I know sometimes he's a little hesitant about talking about it, but we danced. Man, we danced a lot. Sometimes, and some of you kids might know this, sometimes like when the midterm, because it's midterms right now, the midterm would come in the mail, like you get this really weird feeling, right? You're about to dance, or just so many different things. One time, I wasn't the best kid. Obviously, I'm a first-degree felon, right? So I wasn't the best kid. I remember one night, I sneak into my window, I tippy-toe, the lights are off. And when I would sneak out, I would actually put my helmet, my shoulder pads, and I would form some pillows for legs, right? So my dad thought I was there. So I would tippy-toe, and then I'd flip that light on, and one day, my dad was sitting on the bed. I can only imagine what he was thinking with me tippy-toeing right across. But I talk about that feeling. How many of you guys have seen Black Panther? Okay, so there's a part where T'Challa is defending for his crown, and his uncle says, "The strength of the Black Panther will now be stripped away." Yeah, man, we danced. But I had a great upbringing, right? We had everything we needed. I didn't know that we didn't have as much as the other kids, but we were grateful. Gratitude, as President Kawi had addressed in his devotional. Now, I was highly recruited before the Twitter, before the huddle days, and I had quite a few different offers. And so, as Rick mentioned, the decisions that we make, the decision that I made to negotiate my offer letter with Domo, the decision that I made to go to college, that wasn't just me, that was my family. So my dad, we had a family home evening, and he says, okay, this is going to impact the rest of our family's lives because Sione is the oldest, and there's 7 following after him. So my dad sent me to the room, and we fasted and we prayed, and he said, Sione, you go and you decide where you're going to go to college. And the reason why he did that is my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, had already been accepted to University of Utah, and I had a couple friends that were going to other universities. He just didn't want them to deviate what my decision was. I ended up coming out of the room. We had a family home evening, and then I divulged my answer, and it wasn't BYU. And then my dad said, go back in the room and tell Heavenly Father says BYU. Tongan free agency. So I was actually out for a year and a half. I missed a point in the garden because one thing that my parents always warned me about were friends, right? When I was growing up, one of the things that I loved doing is I loved spending time with my grandma Faleaka, helping her in her garden. She'd have this immaculate group of roses, watermelon, corn, but she taught me that if you allow one weed into that garden, what do you guys think would happen? Anybody? What happens if you allow a weed into a garden? What's that? It takes over. What's your name? It really doesn't matter. No, I'm just kidding. That's my last rock impersonation. What's your name again? Karina, thank you so much. Sorry about that. Tidy whities, you know. Yeah, that's a bad sight. So he taught me about that, and I struggled because I had friends that aspired to do good things and go to college and go to class, and then I had this other set of friends that all they wanted to do was put in work for the neighborhood, and I won't lie, I loved both friends. But one fateful night in 1998, before I left on my mission, I let my guard down, and there was a drive-by shooting at my neighbor's house, my best friend, one of my best friends. And we ended up retaliating, and long story short, the retaliation is we ended up burning down the house of our rival gang member. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't have any ecclesiastical interviews, and I ended up leaving. I was out for 14 months, and then I received a phone call from the Salt Lake City Gang Task Force notifying me that I was implicated in that retaliation to that drive-by. I was extradited. I was sent straight home, and I went to jail. I lost everything. My scholarship to BYU, and it was devastating. Imagine spending 16 to 18 hours a day confined to an 8 by 10 foot room, just you and one other person. And that was just the missionary training center. Man. I kid. I won't lie though, the FTC prepared me for jail. You wake up at 6 o'clock every day, you go to bed at 10, you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and if you don't get along with your companion and your cellmate, man, it's tough times. I always called the MTC the jail for good people. Oh man, it is true. But one thing that I did while I was in there is there was just this perpetual cycle. I noticed that there were people that were coming in and out, like they didn't learn from their mistakes. And I was facing 15 years to life, and they eventually offered me a plea deal. They said, if you take a first-degree felony, all you need to do is 1 year. Naturally, just like my offers and just like my mission call, I counseled with my mom and dad and my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. And they were pushing back. But I'm not a gambler, right? So I was just like, this is a great deal. So I ended up taking the deal. And when I got in there, I realized that there were opportunities for me to get better. Life is a lot like a card game. We're all dealt different hands. Some of us in very unique situations might have a rough hand, others royal flushes. It could be any circumstance you can think of. But what I realized is that the way that we're measured in our lives is the way that we play our own hands, not by the way other people play their hands. There was a saying that one of my old football coaches used to say, and this was in reference to the weight room: you're either getting stronger or you're getting weaker, but you're never staying the same. And so I found opportunities to get stronger in there. So there's something called good time. And if any of you guys have had family in the other university system, you're probably familiar with this. Basically, if you take classes or if you work a trustee position, which is a job, you end up getting 10 days off of that particular month. So imagine I did everything I possibly could to get good time. I got a GED, even though I had a high school diploma, and I ended up getting graduated from Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, anger management, you name it. But there was a coveted trustee position known as the librarian. Okay, I know I don't look like a librarian, but The reason why it was so coveted is because you were out of general population for 6 to 8 hours a day. And for me, it wasn't that. It was the access to knowledge. When I was a regular inmate, I would check out 2 to 3 books, and it would take 2 weeks. And by the time I'd be done reading those books in 3 days, I would have to read them again. So this was an opportunity for me to get stronger and not get weaker. So I ended up being awarded that trustee position, and I ended up reading hundreds, if not thousands, of books. And it was one of the most amazing experiences that I had ever had. Upon my release, I ended up marrying my high school sweetheart, Lini Kioa Havili. It was the best day of my life. She waited for me through all that time. There's a saying that goes in my family, the harder you work on your mission, the more beautiful your wife will be. Ooh-wee. Now you know I had to work so dang hard. I was lucky, but I'm also not stupid. When I got my first job at Adobe, the first thing that I made sure I did is I didn't put her on my vision plan, because if she found out what this dude really looked like, ooh-wee. So you ugly guys, there's hope, promise. So I ended up transferring to the University of Utah. The only non-family member that visited me was a guy named Ron McBride. Some of you guys older football fans might remember him. They call him Coach Mack. And so I had an affinity to Coach Mack, and so I decided to transfer to the University of Utah. But naturally, as you guys can imagine, BYU transfer and just coming out of jail, I had to fulfill some requirements. Requirement number 1 is I had to pay for my own school for a year. Requirement number 2 is I had to get a 3.0 GPA. So I did it. It was hard. And I ended up with a 3.8 GPA. And a month before the first game in 2002, I'd competed for a chance to play and maybe even start. But I found out on the radio that I was expelled, that I was kicked off the football team by the athletic director because I was a convicted felon. So that was the second time in my life that I ended up hitting rock bottom. My wife and I didn't fight it. We ended up picking up our things, and we moved to Torrance, California, and I went to El Camino College. Had a good couple games, got re-recruited, and then I earned a scholarship to go to Texas Tech University. There, they had a coach named Mike Leach. So if any of you guys are familiar with the air raid, I ended up going there, and I was a big running back, 2003, 250 pounds, 6'2", and all they do is pass the ball. So the first 2 games, I look in the huddle, and on one side, there's a guy named Danny Amendola, and on the other side, there's a guy named Wes Welker, and they're getting 15 catches a game, and I only get 4 carries total in those 2 games. I was basically a 6 lineman. I know I look like one now, but yeah, it wasn't always like that. But I was grateful, right? We talk about President Kawe's devotional, gratitude. I came home every single day to my wife and my daughter. My school was paid for. I was 5 years removed from football. I was playing in the Big 12. I was extremely grateful. I graduated early. I was laser focused on being a good student. And then, if you guys remember Ron McBride from University of Utah, he ended up getting the job at a school called Weber State in Ogden. So I had already graduated. I was going to go to law school at Texas Tech, but I figured, you know what, let's go ahead and finish this up with Coach Mack. So I transferred to Weber State. Now, it's funny because I think about the transfer portal. It's almost a joke. I invented that. It's my 5th school. No, but it was great. So a week before my first game, I had earned an opportunity to be the starting running back my senior year, and I ended up catching a ball just like you see in this picture, and I had a collision with the linebacker, almost like an experience that I've had hundreds of times before dating down to Little League. But this one was different. As soon as I hit, I blinked, and it felt like that there was something in my eye. And I ended up going to the trainer. They evaluated me for 20 minutes. I could see that there was some panic on their face. They sent me to the emergency room. They started doing all kinds of tests. And at age 25, I had a stroke. And I ended up going 50% blind in my left eye. That was it. That was the end of my football career. Being a Pacific Islander from Glendale, Utah, we were always taught that the only way out of the neighborhood was football. Luckily, my brother made it to the NFL, and we've had other family members, but I did not. And what I realized is that the harsh reality of football or any sport is it's going to break your heart sooner or later. It's just, what can you do with that? Get a college education, maybe you get a couple paychecks. I now serve as the vice president of customer expansion, just a fancy way of saying sales. And Domo actually entrusts me to manage a team to manage their most valuable asset, their customers. And I'm extremely grateful for that. I also serve as the vice chair of the Utah Polynesian Professionals with so many wonderful people that are here today. But one of my passions is, as Rick had mentioned, is to mentor and teach the younger generation to get into tech, to find meaningful job opportunities, to create and remove barriers for convicted felons. Because I was given a chance 12 years ago, now my entire focus is to pay that forward. And so that's why people are always wondering, well, what drives you? This is what drives me. My family and my heritage, and obviously this is a secular keynote, but my faith in the gospel and the Savior. This is a really cool picture with my parents. So after my dad retired 4 years ago, I take him and my mom on almost every business trip with me, and I love it. My mom didn't want to travel for the first year, so my dad went with me on every trip, and we ended up going to New York, DC, Miami, Philadelphia, and this is the first trip that my mom decided she wanted to go on. I'm kind of sidetracking. This isn't part of my keynote, but I want to share, if you look very closely at that picture, you'll notice something. So my dad was like, oh yeah, let's take her to Staten Island Ferry, and let's take her to Empire State Building, right? Like he's a tour guide now. So he says something that we've never done. He said, son, let's go take her ride bikes at Central Park. I was like, Shana, we've never done that before. So I'm not trying to put any salt in his game, right? So we go and we rent bikes, and we're halfway around the park, and my dad is behind us, and me and my mom are just riding very, very steadily, and I just hear this crash. And me and my mom turn around, and my dad is sliding on the pathway. And we ended up having to walk back to the front of the park. It probably took us, what, Mom? Hour and a half, 2 hours? And my dad's a stubborn old Tongan man, so he didn't want to stop tour guiding, right? So we kept going. We ended up going to the temple and to all these other places. But if you notice on this picture, like his whole right side is swollen. He can't see out of his right eye. Before the bike crash, he was tour guiding everything. After the bike crash, he was tour guiding everything on the left side. Sorry, Dad. I had to share that. No, but my family has obviously been stalwart. My wife has been immovable, and I'm extremely grateful. But where I'd like to tie this in is, let's just talk about heritage, right? It's no secret that our people navigated the Pacific Ocean as if it was the 405 in Los Angeles or I-15 in Salt Lake City. And they did it with the constellation of the stars, the currents, and the temperatures of the water. They were brilliant. They were innovators. And I just want to talk about that really quickly. Because what they did is they instilled in us a legacy of fearlessness and strength. First, anybody know who this is? Vaisikama. This is my idol, my childhood idol, and now he's a mentor. But this is a cool story. You don't see him like this anymore. In General Conference, he has to wear a white shirt and tie and stuff. But for those that don't know him, he was one of the very first Tongans in the NFL. He's famous for punching the bag when he scored a punt return in Philadelphia against the New York Giants. He's a trailblazer. And one thing I love about him is that there was no obstacle that he could not overcome. He actually was the first media personality that was Tongan, and he became the very first anchor in one of the biggest markets, Philadelphia, in the East. He ended up receiving a phone call, and I think this demonstrates who we are as a people, Polynesian people. He received a phone call from an agent for Jose Canseco. Jose Canseco, for you kids, was a really good Major League Baseball player. He would smash the ball over the fence, and he was the home run leader. But he wanted to be a boxer, and he had like 3 black belts. And his agent ended up calling Vi, and he was like, hey, man, we want to set up a fight. You're a big name. Everyone knows who you are. He just needs a quick knockout. What do you think Vi's response was? His response was, oh, he ain't going to knock me out. He's like, no. He has 3 black belts. He's 6'4", 270. You're 5'10", maybe 185, dripping wet. How can you stand a chance against Jose Canseco? And the one thing that he said is he said, I'm Tongan. And he says, what does that mean? He says, man, I have gotten some really bad fights with my dad. I am not scared of Jose Canseco. They ended up setting up that fight, and guess what? He knocked him out in the 2nd round. I'm not going to lose because I'm Tongan. This picture was taken in 1945 in Nagasaki, Japan, after the nuclear bombing. This young boy walked from his hometown, which was decimated. He lost his entire family all the way to the nearest cremation location because he wanted his brother to have a respectable death. There was a U.S. Army photographer. His name was Joe O'Donnell. He took this picture, and when he got there, the soldiers are like, put him down. He's heavy. And this young Japanese boy, still unnamed to this day, said, he's not heavy. He's my brother. I share this with you because that's who we are as a people. We're fearless. We have strength. There's nothing that can move us. If you look in that picture from the previous slide, he was stoic because he was taught to love his family and do everything at all costs. In closing, I have 2 thoughts. One of my favorite authors shared a story. His name is Richard Paul Evans. He wrote The Gift Box. And the story that he shared was a story of a man that everywhere he went, his goal was to look on the ground for money. And he did this for 10 plus years. And during those 10 years, what do you guys think he found? Anyone? He found money. He found a lot of money. I think over a duration of like 10 years, I think he said something in the effect of like $500-600 plus. Okay? Students, I know you guys would love $500 or $600 plus. Okay, but the reason why I bring this up is that this man found exactly what he was looking for. But what did he miss out on? There was so much beauty in the world. We think about you youth today. One saying that I strongly believe in is that social media is the thief of joy. So many of you guys are measuring your success by what other people think or what other people like. Some of you guys think that it's cool to not follow the honor code and wear clothes that are not part of, the plan. Whatever it may be. But there's so much beauty that you guys are missing out on when you're just looking for one specific thing. I'd like to leave this one closing thought. And this is where I realized that we are different. I was sitting in a meeting with other sales executives. And the moderator or the leader started to ask questions about, who do you pattern your business after? Who do you pattern your business after? Who's your idol? And of course, you'd hear Jeff Bezos, Steve Cook, Warren Buffett. And when they ended up coming to me, I think they were surprised. They said, who's your business idol? And I said, Pablo Escobar. And they were like, the drug dealer? I said, let me explain. Remember, I read a lot of books in jail, so. Pablo Escobar resonates with me. He resonates with us. Okay? He ended up building an empire, a drug empire, a multi-billion-dollar empire. And it was ripped out of under his feet, and he continued to rebuild. But he was from a very poor village, and he aspired to do big things. And he did it at really no cost. He ended up going head-to-head with Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan ended up shutting basically the stop to America and Cuba. And what do you guys think Pablo Escobar did? He bought another island. He was resourceful. But the way that I manage my business The way that I manage my life was much like Pablo Escobar. He has teams, he has territories, but at the end of the day, he's not trying to hit a number. It's about life or death. And for us students, you think about that perspective, right? Your pathway to a degree, your pathway to a career, it might not be linear. Some of us might have to step away to take care of our families. I remember when I was in college, I had teammates where they were being sent money. I would send my Pell Grant back. That's what you guys are dealing with. You might have to step away and raise a family. But I will tell you this, regardless of the obstacle, regardless of the things that you have to overcome, keep your eye on the prize. When I became blind in my left eye, I could no longer keep things in the peripheral. I had to focus on the things that I wanted to accomplish. And that is my thought, and that is my story, and that is my heritage. And I appreciate your time and your interest. Malo alpito and tomo arigato.
And you guys can see his QR code, so you guys can scan that if you guys want.
Thank you, Sione, for your keynote presentation. I don't know about your MTC room, but mine had about 11 other missionaries with us. We're grateful to have a partnership with Sione and with Doma. Him and other UPP members have been able to place around 20 BYUH students and alumni in job and internship opportunities. So we're extremely grateful for you and all of your hard work. Please give him another round of applause.
Are you guys ready for our next set of keynote speakers for today? Yeah, okay. So our next keynote speakers for today, we have a panel that will be asking questions and answers for today. But to introduce the panel, we have Carl Sokia, who works for Experience Management Solutions, who will be introducing the panel. So if you could just give a round of applause for Carl. And at the meantime, while Carl is getting the panel set up, we'll have our Tahitian family play us some music. So if you feel like dancing while they're setting up, you can get up where you're at, stretch a little while our panel sets up.
Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, we have Auntie Katai and Auntie Kura coming up to get a couple of you to come and have fun and dance with them.
Yeah, if you guys want to join them, you guys can come down. They got some Tahitian moves they can teach you.
Come stretch your legs
Shake, shake, shake.
and your hips.
Okay. Oh. Oh, okay. We're gonna hold up. We're gonna do some like, yeah, Jack, stay on. We're gonna do a couple partner freestyles. Yeah.
I guess what I'll do is I'll sit on this side. Everybody, aloha! Oh, what a great introduction with the musicians and our dancers. Let's give them a quick hand. Awesome. So much fun entertainment and preparation. And I love hearing from Sione about his story. What an inspiring journey he's had and an inspiration he is to all of us. So I'm grateful to be here. Again, my name is Carl Sokia, and I'm the owner of a boutique consulting firm called Experience Management Solutions. Really what that is a small firm that goes out and does consulting with organizations in the world of experience. I focus on everything from leader experience to customer experience, employee experience, and how we can really cater to what people want to see in their lives and really help them to have a great journey within organizations and groups. So my background previous to that, a longtime HR executive in the hospitality sector. So if anybody in here, by show of hands, anybody in the hospitality and tourism degree program? Awesome. That's where I spent my career, was with organizations, some independent organizations like Gemstone Resorts, Grand America Hotels and Resorts, family-owned and so on, and then some larger global corporations like Starwood Hotels, Marriott, Hilton in their luxury sectors with organizations like Waldorf Astoria, St. Regis, Ritz-Carlton, and so on. So I've had a real fun career in HR, had a real fun career in hospitality, and was able to really go out and gain a lot of world experience. I'm born in Laie, and then we moved to Utah. And when I worked for Starwood, I actually came back to Hawaii, worked at the St. Regis Princeville over on the North Shore of Kauai for a few years, and then over at the Grand Wailea in Maui. And so we moved back to Utah about 6 years ago, and I took a role back there. So it's really nice to be back home in Laie and be with all of you. So thank you for the invitation, and I'm excited to introduce our panel and bring them up to be able to talk a little bit about their careers, their organizations, and also we'll do a little bit of Q&A where you can actually ask the questions that you may have, as there's a different journey and a different story for everybody on this panel about how we got to the place we did in our careers, which was very diverse. So all of those who are going to be on our panel, why don't you please come up and join us, and we'll have you take a quick second to introduce yourself. Excellent. So I don't worry, everybody wants that. Andrew, you get to sit next to me. Leanne and Rick. Awesome. So why don't we start with Rick on the end. Rick briefly introduced himself, but just maybe if we could just go one by one and just take a moment to introduce yourself, talk about your title and your organization you're with, but also behind our fun titles, we don't always know what that means and what we do on a day-to-day basis. So maybe give a quick synopsis of really what your role entails and what you do on a day-to-day basis and how that impacts your organization. So Rick, please.
Kia ora, great to be here again. My name is Rick Tolman. I am the Vice President of Computer Stuff for a company called Salesforce. I've been 28 years in what's called digital marketing and tech. And when people ask my wife, like, what does your husband do? She says, I think he designs websites. So it keeps the perspective on, like, it doesn't matter what my job is to her. I'm a husband and a father. You know, in the pandemic, working from home, or I call living at work, it doesn't matter what schedule VP of whatever is doing in the back office. It's like, hey, can you take out the garbage, or can you take the girls to school? Like, yep, that's my job. So VP computer stuff's probably the easiest thing to do. For those that are studying any digital marketing, it's built around lead generation. So my teams attract and develop programs to help customers get informed about our products or services, and then develop ability to be able to make decisions, whether they want to purchase or buy. And then we send those leads over to Sione, Havili's team, to be able to nurture them into customers and then keep them long-term as well. So it's a wonderful career. I've been lucky enough to have this. Again, I've been almost 30 years in digital marketing technology. I also a backup dancer for the Mateterangi Tahitian family as well, as recently as 5 minutes ago. I'm grateful to be here. One of the wonderful things Carl said as well is referencing, like, how do we get into these jobs or these careers in tech? So my background, and I'll share a little more later, is being able to be like many of you, coming from the islands, going up to school and wondering even what I was going to do in college, post-college. Technology came to me because it was a capability for me to be able to communicate with my family back in New Zealand and back in Hawaii. We were one of the only mainland families, so learning and developing early form web technologies. This is back in the very early days of the internet. I got into technology to be able to share updates with my families in New Zealand and Hawaii, instead of sending 2-month snail mail and then 2 months back to receive updates. The wonderful world that we had in front of us was the ability to be able to receive almost real-time emails, messages, content. And so I got into technology to be able to keep that beautiful bond and relationship with the family, and that's why I'm still in marketing and technology, is our ability to be able to connect worldwide cultures, customers, family, and be able to represent that so broadly through technology. So grateful to be here today.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. Leanna.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Okay. My name is Leanna Kennard. I actually was born and raised in Mililani, so I am a Trojan. I moved to Utah to attend the University of Utah, the David Eccles School of Business, where I did my undergraduate degree in marketing. And then I went on to obtain my master's degree in business management from Harvard, so went out to Cambridge. I'm currently the vice president of marketing for the Buckner Company. You'll see our little logo. Most people don't know us. We don't have an office in Hawaii yet. I'm pushing that. I keep sending my CEO emails with pictures. A lot of people don't understand insurance, and I'll be speaking today at 3. Insurance is a beautiful and wonderful industry. I tell my kids all the time, it's a secret superhero job, because we're with clients at the worst time of their lives, and we help them put their businesses back together after a catastrophe. And so it's been very, very rewarding. We insure companies or groups like Team USA. So anyone watch the Olympics, some of those were our clients. The Sundance Film Institute, a bunch of amazing companies that spread through all sorts of industries. And so what I do for marketing, we have 7 offices. I take care of all the branding, advertising, and all of our events for those 7 areas. So glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Leanna. And then last but not least, Andrew.
Aloha mai kākou. My name is Andrew Taioli'i. I grew up here on the island of Oahu, out on the west side in Kapolei. I'm a 2005 graduate from the Kamehameha schools, Imua. I'm extremely humbled and honored to be sitting here on this panel with these esteemed professionals. I'm what you would refer to as the small bubble gum of this crew. I'm a senior software engineer at Twitter. That is my day job. I lead a team of about 8 engineers. We work on the ads callback platform. What that means is whenever you see an ad on Twitter, there is data that is collected. We have millions of requests coming back and forth between phones, computers, different digital devices that connect. And we take those and we process those in real time. That's what I do full-time for Twitter. And then recently we started a business resource group called Twitter Indigenous. This is the first of its kind. Previously, we've had Blackbirds for the Black population of Twitter, Twitter Allahs for the Latinx population, and a few other business resource groups. And I'm happy to be the global co-chair of the new Twitter Indigenous group.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, I want to jump right into it and talk a little bit about the workforce. We've got a lot of people here who are either preparing to leave school and go into the workforce. Some of them that have a little bit more time and are still getting their preparation in. When you look at the current workforce, all of you have had 15, 20, 25 years of experience, whether it be line level, senior level, whatever it may be. What would you say has changed? And where is employment today versus where it was in the past where you had to prepare? And what recommendations would you have for some of the people in the audience that are now looking to jump into, whether it be the tech sector, healthcare, insurance, hospitality, whatever it may be? What advice would you give them that was probably different than what you had to go through, but that you see now as kind of the port of entry for people to get into their first role? So maybe let's start on the end. Rick?
Great question, Carl. It's part of the reason that the industry has changed is manifested by why we're all here today. Whether that's in work or in social life, we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors and the work that's been done to provide opportunities where we can have conversations around why it's so important to have representation across companies, right? Where that's underrepresented minorities, that's gender, that's opening the aperture to bringing a holistic view of global customers to companies. And it's a very different landscape than it was when all of us were coming out of school, where it was more about, in the recruiting days, I'd say back then, it was more about finding people that they could identify, that recruiters could identify and companies could identify and say, yeah, that person is like us. And we want like-minded individuals because if they understand us and they understand what we're doing, then we're all on the same page. Thankfully, because of the work of many, many pioneers in the industry, great leaders, great allies, today it's a very different type of culture, what they're looking for. They're looking for students like you, not to say, do you understand a Twitter or what a Salesforce is or a Google or Buckner Insurance? They're saying, what? That's a common question that they're saying is, what can this person bring to not just be what used to be called a culture fit? Are you a culture fit in the company? Do they fit our values? Now they're looking for culture adds. What can you expand to our company culture? And so for students that are wondering, like if you don't know if you'll have that imposter syndrome of thinking, I don't know what I could do possibly when I think about a big company to go work for. The great thing that you can provide today, it's your uniqueness. It's who you are. It's you bringing your culture. It's the Sione story of bringing his totality of who he was as a person, as an athlete, as a father, as a husband, as a son. What they're looking for is that experience. And Sione mentioned a little bit about his interview process, his candor in opening up and challenging the status quo of what you would typically see in an interview process. Thankfully, leaders like Coop and those at Adobe that brought Sione on, they exist today. Many of these recruiters that are trying to open the aperture are here today as well, doing the same thing, where they're looking to make sure that it's not about falling in line and continuing the status quo. They're looking for those that will change the status quo, because when we open up that aperture to diversity, that creates innovation. That innovation is what leads companies to be successful. So we're in a very different world today where for you students, I would take encouragement. My advice is you don't have to be anything but who you truly are today. And being able to express your story, who you are, where you come from, your capabilities, that is the most important part of interviewing now. that can help add to, expand, and develop their culture. And then ultimately, there's no company in the world that says, we just want to be successful in Arkansas. They want to be global, right? So to be global, you have to have a global representation and also representations of those that have worked with global customers and cultures. And so allyship, being able to really cross boundaries, that's what companies are looking for. So you bring a uniqueness by you attending this university and being willing to open yourself to new cultures, new experiences, and ideas. That alone is a phenomenal quality that gives you tremendous value in interviewing today.
I love that, Rick. One thing that you said that really stood out to me is really having a genuine sense of authenticity, right? Being able to go be your best self and bring yourself to an organization and be a value add. Now, if you look at that from being a diverse a person of color, that's something I think we've felt. But there's also the gender piece, right? Where we were talking about this just yesterday during one of the meals, and we were talking about women in the workforce. I've got 6 daughters, right? And so women in the workforce is very important to me as a father because I want to be able to have my daughters look up to these great women that are doing great things in organizations. And I think we're seeing a little bit of a theme kind of kicking off. I don't think it's really there yet, where people are really taking diversity seriously. So my next question for Liana is, what advice would you have for the ladies in the audience and those that are tuning in regards to how you really feel that you can bring your genuine best self to work, be authentic in starting your first role in the workplace, because that's obviously a big deal when it really comes to comfort and really, being courageous and bringing yourself to a workforce that might not look like you, might not think like you or feel like you.
So if you have a pen and paper, write this down. If you're a student, know what you stand for and stand for it all the time. I think women in the workplace at times, we become a little intimidated. I know some of the interviews, I'm in a very male-dominated industry, and it's one thing to have that confidence and to walk in and to know who you are and to portray that. It always helps to smile. I always smile. I look people in the eye. And one thing that I think that women are really good at is storytelling. We like to talk, at least I do. And I know that some of this might portray, I'm going to just pivot just a little bit. I get asked to interview people sometimes outside of my company. I get asked for some of the companies that we insure, they want a female's perspective when they start interviewing. And this small story I hope resonates with you, but I was asked to sit on the interviewing committee for the Park City Fire Department many years ago. And they like to bring someone from the public sector to interview these firefighters coming in. So I was with a captain, a battalion chief, myself, and a police officer. And I interviewed 80 firefighters in a 2-day period, 80. And they asked the same 5 questions, similar to what Sione was saying, they're just trying to pump through people. And I remember all the answers were the same, hour after hour. And the question was, what have you done to prepare to be a firefighter? And one after another rotating door was, I took my paramedic 1, my paramedic 2, I have my EMT license. Next question, what have you done to prepare to be a firefighter? And there was one person that came in, and it was like 3 o'clock, we were tired, we had already done 30 interviews, and he came in and he paused, and he looked at us and he said, my father helped teach me to become what I think will be a very good firefighter. And I said, why? And he said, my dad at a very young age took me to the construction site. I went with my dad to work every week, and he said, I'm really good in confined spaces. Now, if anyone doesn't know a firefighter, they're in confined spaces, you can't see, it's hot, you have equipment on. And that one answer in 30 seconds painted an entire picture. And I'm happy to say that through 300 applicants, narrow, he was one of 8 that got hired. And a lot of that was due to that one story he shared. So when I say know who you are, know what you stand for, my one advice to women is find a story, something that resonates with you, and share that story. I think your personality shines, and again, that confidence that you are worth everything and more, and to know your value, because I think sometimes it's very intimidating to walk into a boardroom with 6 or 7, depending on what industry you are in. My room was 6 or 7 men, and showing them that I was strong, that I was confident, that I had something to bring to the table. So.
I love that, Leanna. Thank you. What a great example. Yes, please. Next question I've got is going to be guided toward Andrew. Andrew works for Twitter, a very large and recognized organization, especially in today's media. You know, there's a lot of information free flowing, and so he's part of a very large global brand that's recognized. A question I've got for you, Andrew, is in regards to pedigree. Pedigree and position. When you look at LinkedIn, I see a lot of people from Silicon Valley to Silicon Alley, ex-Google, ex-Twitter, ex-this, ex-Facebook, and it seems like that's a real big deal when it comes to pivoting between organizations. What is the importance when you got into your role, when they're preparing for the long term of their organization and say they try to get in some of the larger global brands, but maybe aren't really catching any fish, per se, trying to get into those organizations? What recommendations would you have to say, where is the best place in the tech sector to really get your foot in the door and start pivoting it around, and how does that look?
Thanks for the question, Carl. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. So I kind of found myself initially on the outside of that, right? So, interesting story. When I was graduating from the University of Utah, I went to interview with GE Healthcare on the East Coast. And if you're familiar with interviewing on the East Coast and the tech sector, you show up in a white shirt, a tie, and a suit. And I did not get the memo. And I showed up in a tie and a blue shirt, but I didn't have a suit coat. And I was the only one there without a suit coat, and I didn't realize that. And so I did not get the position. It was kind of interesting. I did have a good interview. I thought I did well, but I was not selected for the position. And then a month later, I interviewed in Silicon Valley at a company called NetApp. And I did not realize there was a difference between the East Coast and the West Coast. And I showed up in my suit, and everybody was there with T-shirts, shorts, and slippers. And the CTO of the company had purple hair. And so it's very, very different. But what I realized is that there are different avenues, different ways you can kind of carve your path. The title of this APCC is Chart Your Course. And so throughout your course, you're going to find different dead ends, but you're also going to find opportunities. And the CTO of the company that I was working with called NetApp, he told me something important, and that was opportunity doesn't just knock. There's a saying called opportunity knocks. And he said, that's not how opportunity works. Opportunities, it's like you're at a train yard. And there's these trains just flying by, opportunities just flying by. And eventually you got to pick which train you're going to jump on. And so NetApp was the first opportunity I got, and I rode that. And then from there, I wanted to move back home to Hawaii. So I came home for my sister's wedding, and I found a job at Hawaiian Airlines doing the same stuff, IT. And I worked my way up very quickly there. I went from software engineer to software engineer 2 to senior software engineer to solutions architect within 3 years. And then after that, I got an opportunity to interview at Amazon. I crushed the interview, but because I was coming from Hawaiian Airlines, I got demoted to a position where I felt I was very overqualified for, and it was apparent within the first year. After that happened, I decided I realized what other people were making, and I realized, like when you ask that question, how has the industry changed? I think the industry has shifted a lot of the power back to the employee. So we have a lot of tools that tell you, okay, you're not making as much as your coworkers, but you're doing more than what they're doing, or you're doing an equal amount of what they're doing. And that's when I really opened up my mind. I took about a month, and I just studied as hard as I could for a set of interviews, and that's when I got the position at Twitter, a position that I was actually qualified for, up to the par that I felt was right for me at the time. And I've been there ever since, and I've loved my time there. So I would say as you hit these dead ends, because you will hit dead ends, there's always other avenues that you can find, and you'll eventually get to where you want to get to, whether it's starting your own company or working for one of these big tech firms like I do right now.
I love that. Great answer. Thank you. So going back, and I'll open this up to anybody on the panel, mentorship. Mentorship plays a big role in our careers, right? Who we listen to, what kind of information we consume, where we're turning for information to really grow our acumen, grow ourselves, and try to build experience. If somebody wouldn't mind jumping in and just sharing, where do you look to for, input, information? Who have you selected as mentors or been guided toward in your life to really gain help and traction? Because you can be very lonely going through your career, trying to make decisions and chart your course and chart that path through and navigate. So maybe what are some of the items that you've consumed, whether they be podcasts, books or magazines like HBR, so on, and who have specifically the mentors that you've selected in your life, whether they be immediate in your life or just those that you follow their content that really inspire you in your career?
I'll jump in, Carl. Mentors right here, Leanna Buckner podcast, Daly, Andrew, Carl. The great thing is, I'll say that the energy and the space that we have today to be able to find people who inspire you is incredible, whether that's through accessing to the internet, through social media, through podcasts. What I'll say is this to the students is, don't be afraid, as you've seen and done today, many of you have done this on Wells, as you've met certain leaders here, you're connecting on LinkedIn. I'm inspired by following certain leaders on LinkedIn, but there's a great connective tissue of both thought leaders that are out in the space, whether you're seeing them post on Twitter or whatever social platform, but have the courage, reach out to them. I know, Carl, you told me many stories where you're reaching out to thought leaders, business leaders, social leaders through social media and never expecting a chance that they're gonna respond to you, and they do. And you have that with leaders here today, students, is that these are leaders, we've all been shaped by someone that has mentored or led us, and so when someone reaches out to us, we take that very seriously. But likewise, don't diminish yourself to think that no one will do that if you do that, if you do the outreach as well. Highly encourage you to reach out to as many as you that inspire you for whatever medium that's on as well, and then engaging with them. I've been so, even having to come through college without social media, today it's nonstop for me to be able to see amazing people doing amazing things, and you're so surprised by just a little bit of outreach, what that does. So take confidence in that. Make sure you're reaching out to those. Make sure you're reaching out to us as well. And then I'll say from an inspirational standpoint, what's been really great is being able to kind of build your day around great motivation. So I'll typically start my morning with some HBR. I like to do some analytics side as well in the morning. By the end of the workday, my brain is fried, so it's murder podcast, cold case. You can do both sides of the fanciful coin of just being able to find the right energy and space for things. And again, this is a tremendous blessing and opportunity that we have in this era today to be able to switch gears, to be able to find the right balance. I think for us, in part of the mentorship space as well, personal wellness is one of those big ones. And so I love following Adam Grant on Twitter, those that are not just inspiring you, but they're also very much focused on you as a human being, you as an individual, and making sure that the totality of who we are also represents, meaning taking the time for ourselves, right? And so time for ourselves can be that it can be a recharge as you're talking to mentors, but also doing things with family, being able to walk outside. I think the balance of time and how much we spend during the day, really reflecting and being conscious of what time are you taking for you, whether that's being to recharge, to fill up on listening to podcasts or talking to mentors versus the actual work. That is the real task and opportunity ahead for us, is balancing our time in another world of the pandemic that we have this year to finish. How do we make sure that we're really reserving and being conscious of the time that we spend? But great, wonderful assets to be able to leverage in terms of looking at mentors. And then again, for the students, reach out, take your shot, talk to them, see what they'll do for you as well.
I love that. Thank you, Rick. Anything, Leanna, Andrew, anything to add to that?
This microphone doesn't echo as much. I keep stealing.
Oh, that's why.
I know what it's like to be a singer now. I need my
We're out here by ourselves on the echo.
Oh, I'm a huge fan of mentorship. So I've mentored students since the year I graduated with my undergraduate degree. I didn't have many mentors growing up, and I told myself that if and when I graduated that I wanted to be what I didn't have. And so I pick one student every year, just one, up at the University of Utah, where my alma mater, and I stay with them for the full year. I help them with their resumes, I help them with their interviewing, I help them with their jobs. I hire most of them, a couple of the students I've interned worked for me. So I would say this, again, take a note, you should have your own personal board of directors. I say that a lot to students. Find your own board, create your own board. whether it's a professor, whether it's a family member. I have several on my personal board that when something comes up or if a career comes up, I call these people and I say, hey, this is where I'm at. I want to talk to you about it. Here's my lifestyle. One of my mentors is my Uncle Frank. He just retired as a senior vice president of the Clorox company. And there was a job offer that I got, and it paid lots and lots of money. And he told me, he said, as much as it sounds great and it would advance you, I think personally it would be a bad mistake for your life as a single mom. I have 2 little kids. And he advised me not to take it. And it was very tempting to take that job, very tempting. And I turned it down because I trust him, and I trusted him. So again, create that group around you of 5 or 6 people, and then I would say always give back. Find an advocate, be an advocate. Another thing I strongly believe in is serving on boards. At one time, this was crazy, I was on 6 boards, and people say, how do you get on there? How do you do this? They find you. And then you can never say no. But what that does for you is you get to work with a group of people that are highly intelligent, highly connected, and you serve with them. There was a talk given once, and I can't remember who it was, is how do you spell love? And it's T-I-M-E, time. Is spend time with people, learn them, ask questions. So I know at one time on my board I had 5 people. I had my Uncle Frank, I had someone at the Buckner Company, I had one of my neighbors who's successful, I had someone that I went to Harvard with, and I rely on these group of 5 to help make decisions. And some of them are up here, and personal advisors as well. I'll call Rick at 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, I know you're up, I need advice. So just remember, build your internal board, serve and network with those around you, and don't be scared to reach out. I also think you can have mentors that you don't know. Bob Iger, if anyone knows Bob Iger, he was CEO of Disney, I would love to meet that man. I have read his book 3 times. He is a mentor to me when I read. I've watched his master classes. I love what he's done. But he's been a huge inspiration to me in my career as well. Don't know him, but I consider him on my board. So
I love it. Andrew?
Yeah, let me just add real quick. I feel like there's something that you can learn from everyone and from every experience that you have. So just to kind of add to what they were talking about, when I came off my mission, I was looking for a job, and I just pulled this tab off an advertisement, and it ended up being for like selling vacuums, and I realized I didn't want to do it after like the first day, but I did learn one thing. And the guy who was, he kind of had us all in a group, and he asked, what makes someone successful? And everybody raised their hands. They're like hard work, dedication. They said a bunch of different good qualities, good traits. And then he wrote on the board, he wrote this word, opportunity. And so it was an epiphany moment for me. And I never worked for the company, but I learned from that experience. And so my advice would just be to soak everything in. Doesn't matter who you're talking to. Respect what they have to offer and soak it in. For me personally, my biggest mentor is definitely my dad. If you know who my dad is, you know his career path and his spiritual path. I basically just try to copy it as close as I can. Obviously, I have a few more faults than he does, but I try to copy that path, and I've been, decently successful in that path. And then also at Twitter, we have a really good mentorship program, and I have a personal mentor that I work with, someone who's senior to me, who's been mentoring me over the past few months. And so as you students are going out and getting hired at different jobs, like definitely big +1 to what Leanna and Rick are talking about. Find a mentor in your company. If your company's not offering mentors, find them some other way. But that's been the biggest blessing in my career is finding that mentor.
I love that. Such great wisdom. And I think as you go through your career, those will evolve, and you'll kind of shift and look for different people to follow based on their experience. So great. So now I think we're going to turn the time over to you. We want to be able to, I think we've got people running mics, if I'm not mistaken. And so if you have a question, put your hand up in the air, or you can just yell out. Yeah, we've got people over here with microphones. If you want to ask a question to the panel or to somebody specifically, please take a moment and do so. So if you just want to raise your hand, we'll get your questions. Right over, oh, we got somebody? Guaranteed it's an insurance question.
G'day guys. the mindset on campus with a lot of my studies as an anthropology and political science student is sort of falling in between, you know, the purpose of this APCC, which is the Polynesian students, and a lot of it is like, if we ever think of an Ivy League school, or if we ever think of a CEO job or some amazing place, it's sort of like the mindset, even from back home, it's not there. It's either sports or you work in a warehouse back home in Australia for a lot of my mates, and you know, you just get normal jobs. Us being here, you know, you guys are the purpose and the example for that. What's some advice for students who can excel using our story into getting into really good places, possibly Ivy League schools, not just, you know, for the status, but the opportunity, like you said? Because I've noticed that there's been a lot of students, graduates from BYU, who have did their bachelor's, allowed time to use experience and to work in the workforce, and then that opportunity granted them into greater places of academia. But what are your thoughts on that period for us, rather than, you know, the mindset here of come straight from the islands of Australia, get a bachelor's, go straight to BYU Provo, get a master's, and, you know, but that's just a general thing for a lot of students on campus. What are your thoughts?
Love the question. Let me say this quickly too, is we're part of the reason that we're here is to make sure that we recognize with all of our families, our cultures, where we come from. We grew up and we're conditioned to see the playbook that our families have done for generations, right? We see what happens around us as we grow up. That's what shapes our influence in terms of what does the realm of possible look like. So if aunties and uncles have been doing, like for Polynesians, it's sports for decades, like Sione says, that's kind of what you grow up conditioned as to see. And so a big part of why we hold conferences like this is to challenge that playbook and say, oh, but look, there's someone that looks like you, that talks like you, that's doing something that's outside of that playbook. So even just the simple matter of if you can see them, you can be them, right? And that's key, is being able to look at and see that there's a different realm of possible. And not that any of us came out of college going like, I'm gonna work in insurance, right? Well, yes. But we looked at, we were looking around for other examples and families giving us advice on what to do. But the reality is as we started to navigate and figure out our course, it's where the destinations ultimately brought us to here. We're culmination of our experiences. But what we're really trying to do is help students see from wherever you came from, mainland, from the islands, from Asia proper, Asia Pacific, is that there's people and leaders that are in careers today that didn't have this perfectly laid out plan, nor were they major limited, thinking like, oh, I'm a sociology major, I can't get into tech. No, tech needs sociology majors. And so one of the great things is that we have is this capability to really say, how do we then be confident in what we're bringing to the table, not knowing exactly the application, and that's what we're here for. That's what we're here for, is to make sure that you can see, if you could only see yourself through our lens and how we see what we were once doing, being able to give you that opportunity. But what you're doing now is being able to identify and look at both what's kind of been taught generationally to you. Great, that's fantastic. Keep that as an option. And then the challenge would be is take the opportunity as you're meeting other leaders, as you're seeing someone that looks like you, talks like you, that's from Oceania, also from, you know, one of the best parts of Oceania, New Zealand, you know, or we'll take Australia a little bit too, you know, but being able to look at them and go, but they did something different. What is that? Find out what that looks like, because it's not as difficult as you may think it is. It's not as deliberate as you may have thought it was. That's the reality that we have right now, is to be able to really go expand and open our minds to what are the other playbooks around that too.
And I just want to jump in just to add to that. One thing I love that my brother Sione said was, stop looking at externally for answers. Look in here. And I think I'm very non-traditional in this group. I look up to all these guys. I look up to these guys. My brother Isaac over here and I grew up together, you know, but I didn't go to college. Wish I would have. I was on the same train as my man Sione, but Sione actually made a good correction in his life while I kept going in the wrong direction. And I started as a shuttle driver for $5 an hour at a small airport hotel. I didn't have a car, and I was living in a little apartment by myself. Didn't have anything. And I became an exec. My career branched all the way to being an executive over, a collection of hotels, 4,500 employees over 5 states, and I ran all of it. And you can do that if you want, but you've got to be the one that says, this is what I'm willing to do to get to that point, right? So I don't take pride in not having an education. It's something I regret, and I wish I would have taken seriously, and all my girls will have their educations. Don't you worry about that. But it's one of those things that don't worry about externally what people are telling you can or can't do. You have to be the one committed and find something that motivates you, that you feel that you can really make a ding in your universe, and then go after it. And don't tell anybody you can't. And if somebody does in your organization tells you can't, maybe it's time to pivot and look to another place. So I just want to add that to Rick's feedback.
So, I just wanted to share a quick Harvard story because people hear Harvard and they're like, oh my gosh, and my only goal was to graduate high school. That was my goal. Mililani High School, I just need to graduate because my older sister hadn't finished and my parents didn't graduate from college. I'm like, I can just graduate high school, I've made it. Harvard, real quick, I was up in Park City, Utah, and my girlfriend was getting married, and it was a bachelorette party, and there happened to be a bachelor party going on at the same time, and there was a bunch of these 12 guys, and they just looked different. They looked successful, so I remember going and talking to, I called him Creepy Pete. I hope he's not watching. His name's Pete, but he was a little off. And I was trying to figure out how these 12 guys knew each other, and one was from DC, one was from San Francisco, one was from Chicago, and I'm like, how are you all here? And he said, we all went to Harvard together. And I was like, Creepy Pete, come closer. I just want to hear this Harvard story. And it was that night, I'm like, if these guys can go there, I can go there. That was how I went to Harvard. That literally is my story. And we went back to the hotel. We got home at 3 a.m. We went up to the hotel room, and I got on my laptop at 3:01, and I looked at the admissions for Harvard. That was the first time I ever thought of going there, was at that night. So I applied. I didn't get in the first time, and I didn't get in the second time. They had 2 placement exams for this executive program. You don't take a GMAT. And I had to hire a tutor. My tutor was 21, way younger than me. He was one of my students that I mentorship, right? And on the 3rd time I got in. And so when people hear that, and it took me 7 years to finish that degree, I got divorced in the middle of it. Harvard, for my exact degree, they give you 5 years. Because I took a 3-year break from my divorce, Harvard said, oh, by the way, you didn't finish it in 5, you're gonna lose all your credits. And I just spent thousands of dollars on classes I got A's in. And so I called a classmate, again, networking mentorship, who's a lawyer in DC for an oil company. And I said, Malcolm, they're gonna kick me out. And he said, I'll take care of it. He wrote a letter to President Lawrence, and they extended it under my family circumstance. So you talk about the story, people just see the end certificate, they see my degree, and they don't know that it was in Park City, Utah, after seeing someone at a bachelor, oh, I can go there, they can go there, and then not getting in 2 times, and then going, and then withdrawing because I couldn't afford tuition, and then going back, writing a letter to the dean. It was a journey, and I graduated last year, but I get to walk this year, and it will mean much more to me this year than it ever has for anything else because of the struggle it took to get there. So just know that sometimes along your path, you don't even know what you're capable of, but when that train comes by and that opportunity, you jump and you try, and if you fail, it's okay. You fail 8, get up 9. So maybe we'll see you in Cambridge.
Find your Creepy Pete, right? Good.
Aloha. Just real quick, with our students here at BYU Hawaii, I just wanted to ask, because we have all this discussion about diversity, and I feel like sometimes our students feel that diversity is exclusive to certain demographics of students. Could you guys maybe share what you see on your corporate side of what diversity means and how we should be interpreting that on this side of the educational pathway that these students are on?
Am I taking this one first? Okay. All right. Well, maybe turn your phones off or something. But yeah, the goal for Twitter, one of the big goals, is to become the most diverse tech company in the world, right? And we can't do that without representation from every community. Because we serve the global conversation, we need to have people in positions of influence where they can bring their community, their story into what we do. Because we do serve global industry, like Rick was talking about earlier. So it's definitely not exclusive to any of the different demographics that we see. So on my team, I have people from China, I have a brother from Ukraine, myself, I have one from Africa, my manager is Chinese, I am Samoan and Hawaiian. And so we have a very, very diverse set of people, very, very smart. Nobody's underqualified. So there's a very high bar at Twitter. Everybody that applies, about 0.2% get into Twitter. But we keep that bar high, and we strive for diversity because that's the kind of company that we want to be, a global company who serves everybody, not just a specific culture fit. Yeah.
That wonderful answer said too. Quick add to that as well is he mentioned he's taken on a recent leadership role in what's called employee resource groups. They're affinity groups where the affinity means you feel a connection to someone because of a shared common value. So Andrew is helping with the indigenous groups at Twitter, and these are much more common now in companies, is these affinity groups where it's more about like how do you care about or have a common bond and find common ground together. And that can be an affinity group made up of, when you talk about diversity, it's not just about cultural norms, it's about gender, it's about identity, think about things like it's more commonly looked at for race or for gender or for sexuality, but there's things including things like veterans. It's those that are eco-conscious, that want to have a net zero impact on the world. And so you have recruiters here today that they'll talk to you at length around what does it mean to be diverse. Diverse isn't just looking at a specific stereotypical check the box, they're this, or this. Diversity is the ability to open up the aperture and really create a lens that thinks about the entire human population, finding a common ground on things that are important to social matters as well as the environment, but also being able to look at that from the lens of these aren't just people that identify with that, there's also a place for allies in those as well. Some of the ERG groups that I participate in are for women in tech or for disabled veterans as well. So it's not that I'm a woman in tech or a disabled vet, but I'm there to show my support for those groups and learning how I can be a better citizen in their communities as well. So diversity, it's easy to kind of get wrapped up in looking at the little check the box demographic and technographics, but it's more than that. Think more in the sense of the affinity groups. How do we align and share and find common ground with others on common principles and values that are important? And for companies, they want to reflect and represent those affinities because that also reflects their global customers.
And on top of what Rick just said, what Andrew said really resonated a moment ago with me was he was saying the tide has turned and it's really to the employees now to make a lot of the hiring decisions of where you want to go. Where in the past economies, it's been really in the hands of the organization to say, we'll handpick whoever I want. It still is a little bit that way, but I encourage you to find those organizations who really do what Rick's saying and really reward them with your talents and abilities. Because you were born to be kings and queens. So I hope you find the right alignment with organizations and celebrate them for really taking the steps and not just checkboxing things, as he had mentioned as well. Because then you can bring people along with you on your journey and introduce them as well, and we can all celebrate together. Who else has a question? Oh, I see two up here, one down here. Whoever gets the microphone first. And go! Just kidding.
Last one, Carl, that's it. Then we take pictures.
Okay. Yeah, I love it.
Just one real quick question. What would you say would be the key to being comfortable with unorthodoxy? Because I feel like all students have a unique story, but sometimes they struggle to say it because they're either very passionate about it or they don't feel like they fit in, because that's usually what a lot of people would find really difficult to break in and find that path to success. I'm just really happy that the Chart Your Course theme is it's making sense as the theme developer, that it can get quite confusing, but when you have the mentors, like what you are saying, the path becomes clearer. So if one comes in and they have a very unorthodox approach, like what Carl was saying, how do they feel comfortable about that approach?
Okay, so I'm a very outgoing, I'm actually an extroverted introvert. Many people don't know that. When I'm home, I am home. I don't want to be out. I have a very public job. But I would say if, to be comfortable, you know, how you said everyone is, you know, has their own uniqueness, is to start small. Start small. Start every day with like, hey, I'm going to go introduce myself to someone that I don't know. I'm going to go to a club that I've never went to, or I'm going like a student club, or I'm going to go, I don't normally watch basketball, but I'm going to go to a basketball game. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That would be my best advice, is that the more you can be comfortable in situations that are not normal, the quicker you will learn to adapt and to pivot. I also think I like being unique and I like being special, meaning like that came out wrong, I like being special. When I go into a room, I know that I have something to offer because I'm not like everybody else. And so I think too, there's so many nationalities and ethnicities around, and if you're in a room of people with your same ethnicity or, you know, background, just say, you know what? Let's go combine with another group, or let's go, I just think you have to be proactive versus reactive in life. And when you know that there's maybe a weakness that you're struggling with, this is a little marketing thing. SWOT, I know they kind of refrain from SWOT. They're saying it's old school, but I still kind of think it's a good bias. I always tell people to do your own personal SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, what are your opportunities and threats? Do it on yourself. What are you strong at? What are you weak at? And hopefully when you write that, I have a long list of weaknesses, and every month I'm like, okay, what can I move? What can I work on to make it what I'm weak at strong? So I think you just have to keep, you know, conditioning yourself and being comfortable. If you're not comfortable, you know, exploring or being in new situations, then that's what you should be doing.
Love that. What a great answer. Okay, real quick, as we wrap up, 10 seconds, favorite quote or parting advice to the group.
I think the thought that comes to mind right now is it is very in the songbook and lyric book of Eminem. It is seize the moment. You know, the moment is now. So it's you have many wonderful people here that are coming specifically to meet you, to help you with that outreach, and so take advantage of the moment that you have now to make that connection.
I already shared mine. So Clayton Christensen, he just recently passed. He was a famous Harvard professor. And one of his quotes, there's a book that my Harvard professor in my last class told me to buy, and it said, how will you measure your life? So look that up, Clayton Christensen, How Will You Measure Your Life? It was Steve Jobs' favorite business book. And one of the things that Clayton said that I started with is know what you stand for, and stand for it all the time. And I think that's personally your ethics, your morals, your values. And I think professionally, know what you stand for, whether what company it is. There's some companies that people might want to work for, but if their leadership doesn't align with your values, not the company for you.
Awesome. I would just add two things: patient, preparation. So your time's going to come. Be patient. We live in obviously I work for Twitter, so everything's like very real time. Your time's going to come. So just be prepared when it comes. Keep grinding, keep going through whatever it is that you need to do to be prepared. A lot of you computer science students, you came and talked to me, and I talked to you about leak code and practicing programming challenges. Do that over and over and over. I spent hours for about a month before I felt prepared enough to interview at Twitter. So be prepared, but be patient. Your time's going to come. I promise you. You're all young. You're very bright. It'll come. You just got to wait.
I love that. Let's give one big round of applause for our panel. Thank you for your valuable insights. We sure appreciate sharing with everybody, and thank you for your questions. We'd now like to invite everybody up to the stage, and we're actually going to take a big group photo together. So if everybody could make your way up here onto the stage, we're going to have a photographer right at the top take a photo of all of us together. Thank you again, everybody.